Monkey D. Luffy is a rubber boy. This simply isn't just his powers, but a description of his identity. He ate the gum fruit, and the entire trajectory of his life follows from that. Roronoa Zoro is the boy who made a promise to a dead girl to become the greatest swordsman in the world. His identity is a vow. It's about what he will be. Nami is the navigator whose childhood was stolen by Arlong, whose village was held hostage for 8 years, whose arc is about reclaiming the home that was taken from her. Robin is the scholar who survived the massacre of her world and spent 20 years in the shadows, whose arc is about finally being allowed to exist. Usopp is the liar who keeps choosing to be brave anyway. Every single one of the Straw Hats is defined by something external that happened to them. What they are, what they were given or what was taken, the specific wound or gift that made them who they are. Vinsmoke Sanji is different. Sanji is defined not by what was done to him, but by what he chose to remain in the face of what was done to him. And that distinction, that small, enormous distinction, is what the entirety of his character is actually about. Sora took a drug designed to counteract the genetic modification. She knew it would destroy her body. She knew she might not survive it. She did not know which of her children it would affect. She did it anyway. It affected Sanji. His brothers were born as Judge intended, enhanced, emotionless, physically superior weapons shaped like people. Sanji was born as Sora intended. He was born human. Now this is the crucible the entire character of Sanji rests on, and I want all of you to sit with this for a moment. Sanji did not choose to be human. He was made human by his mother's sacrifice before he could choose anything. The humanity that Judge saw as a defect was not an accident or a failure of the modification. It was the result of a deliberate act of love that cost Sora her life. Sanji's emotion, the thing that defines him, the thing that shapes every choice he will ever make, is not something that survived despite the institution that tried to remove it. It is something that was given to him at enormous cost by the person the institution could not control. And this is the foundational paradox of the character we all know and love. The thing that makes Sanji Sanji is not something he earned or chose or fought for. It was a gift, the most expensive gift in the series, paid for in the slow collapse of a woman's body over years. Every time Sanji chooses to remain human in the face of circumstances that would reward being otherwise, he is not simply expressing a preference. He is honoring a debt to a woman who died for the possibility that her son could be the person he is. There is a lot of criticism, and rightfully so, of him being overboard with being a simp. I do also agree that it is too much at times, especially post-time skip. But I do believe that his character arc justifies the antics to a point. He is by far one of my favorite Straw Hats, and I'll be covering just exactly why that is today. Judge's response to Sanji's humanity was clinical. He was not disappointed the way a father is disappointed in a child. He was disappointed the way an engineer is disappointed in a defective component. He imprisoned Sanji. He had his brothers beat him. The specific cruelty of children who have had their empathy surgically removed being allowed to act on it without consequence. He forbade Sanji from the kitchen, the one place the boy had found something that felt like himself, and told him his interest in cooking was shameful, an embarrassment to the Vinsmoke name. He kept Sanji alive because killing him would waste resources. Sanji spent years in that cage as proof, to himself and to his father, that the thing he was, emotional, gentle, interested in feeding people rather than killing them, was wrong. And this is where the adult character becomes legible. Because everything Sanji is as an adult is a response to that cage. Judge forbade Sanji from the kitchen, the one place the boy had found something that felt like himself, and told him his interest in cooking was shameful, an embarrassment to the Vinsmoke name. This deserves more attention than it usually gets, because of what the kitchen specifically represents in the logic of the Germa kingdom. Everything else in that kingdom was organized around conquest, extraction, weaponization, taking from the world by force. The kitchen is the one activity Sanji found that is organized around the opposite premise. Making something for someone, converting raw material into nourishment, producing a thing whose entire purpose is to be given away and consumed by someone else's body, for someone else's benefit. He forbade it, because cooking is the precise philosophical inverse of everything Germa is built to do. A prince of Germa is supposed to take. Sanji wanted to give. That is why it was intolerable to Judge, because it was the visible proof that the modification had failed exactly where it mattered. He kept Sanji alive because killing him would waste resources. Even Sanji's survival, in other words, was calculated on terms that excluded his worth as a person. The code about not hitting women, I'll spend significant time on this later, is the specific moral architecture of a person who was hit by people who claimed to love him, who found the idea of a strong person hurting someone with less power than them, not just strategically wrong, but viscerally, personally unacceptable. The logic is not abstract. It comes from the specific bodily memory of being small and being hurt by people who were large. Which brings me to the All Blue. I have a section dedicated for this, but I'll touch on it for a bit here first. The all-blue dream is the specific dream of a person whose early years were defined by confinement. Of all the dreams you could give a child raised in a cage, Oda gives him the most boundless place imaginable, a sea without walls, where all the world's varieties of fish gather freely, where nothing is classified or ranked, where east and west and north and south dissolve into a single infinite meeting place. The child raised in a kingdom that valued genetic purity and ranked its children by their capacity to be weapons dreamed of a sea where everything belonged. The cooking is the thing that was taken from him and that he took back, and the warmth he gives so freely, to strangers, to enemies, to people nobody else will feed, is the warmth that was withheld from him, and he gives it not because he had it in abundance, but because he knows, with the particular precision of someone who has denied it for years, exactly what it is like to have none of it. Sanji escapes the Germa kingdom at a young age, aided by his sister Reiju, and ends up working as an apprentice cook on a passenger ship called the Orbit. The Orbit is attacked by the pirate crew of Red Leg Zeph. A storm destroys both vessels. Only Sanji and Zeph survive, washed onto a barren rock with no food, no fresh water, nothing that grows. Zeph divides what little they have between two bags. He gives Sanji the smaller bag and keeps the larger one for himself. Sanji, a child, assumes this means the larger bag has more food. He rations his own food carefully. He starves for over 2 months after his rations run out, 85 days total on the rock, before finally going to take Zeph's bag. And inside the larger bag, treasure, gold and jewelry, no food. Zeph had given Sanji everything they had to eat, kept nothing, and survived the 85 days by eating his own leg. Sanji breaks down. He asks why. Zeph answers, same dream. Just sit with those 2 words for a moment. Same dream. It was not Zeph owing him something, nor was it Sanji reminding Zeph of himself. It was simply Zeph recognizing the dream Sanji has. And that recognition is sufficient justification for the sacrifice of the self. Shared humanity, shared aspiration, is enough. You don't need to earn it. You don't need to deserve it. You exist. I see something of myself in you, and that is enough. This is the principle Sanji will operate by for the rest of the series. He will feed enemies because they are hungry. He will save people who do not deserve saving because they are people. He will put himself between danger and strangers because they are there and he can. The logic is always the same logic as the rock. You exist, I see you, that is enough. And in my opinion, Sanji was not taught to be kind on the rock. He was given the capacity to be kind by his mother before he was born. What the rock gave him was the first external proof that the capacity was real, that the world outside the Germa cage contained people who operated by the same logic his mother operated by. Sora sacrificed herself so her son could feel. Zeph confirmed that the world outside the cage contained people who sacrificed themselves for feeling. Sora's sacrifice made the capacity possible. Zeph's sacrifice made it credible. Both were necessary. Sanji built his life in the shape of both. Sora could not raise Sanji herself. She could only give him the capacity to be the person she wanted him to be, and then she died. She could not choose his environment. She could not choose the people who would shape him. But, and this is the specific miracle of the story, the person who ended up shaping him operated by the exact same logic she operated by. Sora gave her body for Sanji. Zeph gave his leg for Sanji. Both sacrifices were unrequested, disproportionate, and freely made. Sora and Zeph never met. They would never meet. But they are structurally the same person in Sanji's life, the one who gave the self so that Sanji could have something. The blood that runs through my veins is the blood of the Baratier. Zeph is his father, not in addition to Judge, but instead of Judge. After Don Krieg's invasion is repelled, and Luffy asks Sanji to join his crew, Sanji refuses, repeatedly, and not out of loyalty to the restaurant business, but because he has decided, privately, that he owes Zeph a debt so total it cannot be repaid by anything except staying at the Baratier for the rest of his life. This is not gratitude functioning normally. This is gratitude functioning as a life sentence. Sanji had received so little unconditional care as a child that the one instance of it he ever received nearly consumed the rest of his future. He was prepared to give up the all blue, give up the sea entirely, and spend his whole life working in one kitchen, because he had decided that wanting things for himself again would be a betrayal of what Zeph sacrificed to keep him alive. Zeph does not let this happen. He tells Sanji, in essence, that dying slowly inside a debt is not what the sacrifice on the rock was for, that repaying a life by throwing another life away is what weak people do, not what he wants for the boy he nearly died for. A cage made entirely out of gratitude, a second cage that he entirely built for himself. So when Sanji finally does leave, bowing formally to every cook in the kitchen, saying the words that would later become one of the series' most quoted farewells, walking away in tears, he does not bother hiding. The choice to accept that he is allowed to want something for himself, that leaving the person who saved him is not, in fact, abandonment. and that the dream Zeph gave up his leg for is a dream Zeph actually wants him to go and chase, not a dream to be quietly buried under a lifetime of gratitude. Love as release rather than possession is not something Sanji arrived at easily. It had to be forced into him, by the collaborative theater of an entire kitchen staff, by a father figure willing to seem cruel for exactly as long as it took to make the point stick. The All Blue is a legendary sea said to exist at the convergence point of all four of the world's oceans, East Blue, West Blue, North Blue, South Blue, where fish from every sea on Earth are found together. Most cooks consider it a myth, a sailor's story with no more substance than any other legend traded in ports. Sanji believes it is real, and has believed it since before he ever set foot on the Baratie. I want to look closely at what kind of dream this actually is, because I think the shape of it tells you more about Sanji than almost any single scene could. The All Blue is not a title he will hold, or a rank he will achieve, or a version of himself he will become once he arrives. It is a place, a condition of the world that either exists or does not exist, independent of Sanji entirely, that needs to be found, rather than achieved. His dream is not about what he becomes. It is about discovering that something beautiful is real, whether or not he is the one who discovers it, whether or not anyone believes him when he does. And what is beautiful about it is that it is a place of convergence without hierarchy, a sea where the fish of the East Blue, and the fish of the West Blue, and the fish of the North Blue, and the fish of the South Blue all exist together, none superior, none classified, none expelled for belonging to the wrong region, the wrong bloodline, the wrong category of origin. He grew up in a kingdom that classified its children by their genetic worth, that ranked its own sons by their proximity to a fixed ideal of what a soldier should be, that treated deviation from the ideal as something to be locked away rather than accommodated. He grew up in a world that told him his specific nature, emotional, soft, interested in cooking rather than conquest, made him inferior to his brothers by definition, no negotiation possible. And out of that world, he produced a dream of a sea where no fish is classified as inferior to another, where everything simply belongs by virtue of existing there. The child raised in the cage dreamed of the exact opposite of a cage, a place without walls, without sorting, without the entire apparatus of ranking that had organized every day of his childhood. And here's the further dimension of the All Blue that I need to touch on, because it changes what the dream means once you know it. The All Blue is the dream that saved his life. Zeph heard a small, half-starved boy talk about the All Blue in the chaos and desperation of the storm, before he knew anything else about him, and that shared dream, two people, otherwise strangers, recognizing the same specific longing in each other, was the bond that made the sacrifice on the rock possible. The All Blue produced the Baratie, because Zeph eventually built the restaurant on the belief the two of them shared. The All Blue is, structurally and without exaggeration, the reason Sanji is alive at all. The dream is not simply what he wants out of his life. The dream is the specific mechanism by which his life was preserved in the first place. The dream is the architecture. Sanji does not fight women. He has described it as absolute, and he has held to it when holding to it made him tactically useless, when it allowed him to be beaten nearly to death. At Eni's lobby, he let Khalifa, one of the CP9 assassins, beat him rather than strike back, and had to ask Nami to fight her in his place. At Wano, Black Maria tortured him through his female subordinates, and he refused to defend himself, calling Robin for help instead. The rule costs him something real, regularly, and he pays the cost every time. The rule is not primarily a statement about gender. It is primarily a statement about Sanji. It is the specific moral architecture of a person who was hurt by men with power over him, hurt systematically, hurt by people who claimed to love him, who found that experience so intolerable that he made an absolute commitment. I will not be the thing that was done to me. I will not use my strength against someone I can hurt. The model Sanji had for how power operated, his father, his brothers, was the model of power used against the relatively powerless. His brothers beat him because they were stronger. His father imprisoned him because he had the authority. The rule about not fighting women is the specific form his rejection of that model took. It is not a perfect rejection. Trust me, it irritates me too, but it is a sincere one. A rule held imperfectly, but sincerely, is a different thing than a rule held perfectly as a pose. The code cannot be fully separated from the cage. If you grow up being hurt by people who are supposed to love you, you will not emerge from that experience with a perfectly calibrated moral framework about the use of power. You will emerge with something more personal, more specific, more shaped by the particular nature of what happened to you. Sanji emerged with a rule that says, I will not be the thing that was done to me. The specific target of the rule, women, is the form that rejection took. It is imperfect, but it is genuinely his. In Wano, Sanji is using the raid suit during combat when he encounters a woman, a geisha from the flower capital, who ends up injured and terrified of him. His memory of the incident is unclear. He cannot be certain what happened, but the possibility that the suit, Germa technology, his father's technology, applied to his body, allowed him to hurt a woman without his knowledge is enough. He destroys the raid suit. He stomps on the canister, destroying it completely, and then calls Zoro to ask him to kill him if he loses his humanity after this war. The rule is not abandoned in Wano. The rule is honored by the destruction of the thing that compromised it. The raid suit is Germa technology applied to Sanji's body. Using it means allowing the institution that tried to remove his humanity to enhance his combat capacity. He tolerated this for as long as the benefit to his crew seemed to outweigh the compromise. The moment the suit created any ambiguity about whether it caused him to hurt someone he had sworn not to hurt, the calculation collapsed. He cannot use the thing that makes him capable of doing the thing he will not do. The other part of his code is feeding anyone who is hungry. He fed Gin when no other cook at the Baratier would. Gin was a member of Don Krieg's pirate crew, which was, at that exact moment, the crew threatening to invade and take over the Baratier by force. Gin was visibly dangerous and visibly starving. Sanji fed him. When other cooks objected, he said something simple. A cook cannot refuse food to a hungry person. The principle traces directly to the Rock. He knows what it is to be starving. He knows, from the most personal possible experience, that hunger is not a moral state. Gin was hungry. That is sufficient. The simplicity of the justification is the depth of the principle, and the kitchen fight with full body, the marine who wastes soup, is the same principle stated in action before Sanji ever states it in words. Sanji beats a marine, only due to the fact that the marine wasted food, which is a specific act that violates his most fundamental principle. Now with all of that out of the way, let's talk about Whole Cake Island. Full Cake Island is where we see every element of Sanji's character, being tested against conditions specifically designed to break it. Big Mom has arranged a political marriage between Sanji and Charlotte Pudding to acquire Germa's military technology. Sanji is taken from his crew through the simplest and most effective of threats. Comply, or people you love will die. Zeph will die. The crew will be killed. He leaves without telling Luffy why. He pushes Luffy away. He plays the role of willing participant in a marriage he knows is a trap. Sanji goes because he has structured his entire moral universe so that his own needs, his own safety, his own life are lower priority than the people around him. This is the legacy of the cage operating in the most direct possible way. The child who was told for years that his existence was the problem, that he was the defective component, the embarrassment, the reason things didn't work, grew into a man who will consistently structure situations so that his own welfare is the variable he sacrifices first. In most contexts, this looks like nobility. In Whole Cake Island, it looks like self-destruction, but the structure is the same in both cases. Sanji has internalized the lesson that his existence is lower priority than other people's. The difference between the man and the boy is that the man now applies that devaluation in service of others, rather than in service of Judge's approval. And one of my favorite moments of the entire arc, I am not leaving without you, Sanji. Quote, without you I cannot become the king of the pirates. Luffy, having refused to accept the rejection at face value, pursues him into Big Mom's territory. He is beaten badly by the Charlotte family in the attempt, and rather than retreat once it becomes clear how outmatched he is, Luffy declares he will not eat and will not move until Sanji returns to him. He says simply, I am not leaving without you, and he means it. He sits in the rain, beaten and starving, and waits, because Luffy's relationship to abandonment is absolute. He does not leave the people who are his, no matter how convincingly they perform not being his. What this moment does to Sanji is the heart of this entire video. He has spent the entire arc constructing an elaborate, internally consistent argument for why leaving his crew is the right choice, why his own removal from the equation is the correct calculation, and why the kick was necessary to sell that argument. And Luffy, who does not do elaborate, internally consistent arguments, simply refuses to accept the premise. He's not there because Sanji earned it. He is there because Sanji is his. The same logic as Sora, the same logic as Zeph. You are mine, therefore I stay. Sanji knows Luffy will wait. On some level, he knew Luffy would wait before he ever threw the kick. This is part of what makes the arc so devastating. He left anyway, believing the cost was necessary, even though he already suspected what it would cost Luffy to accept it. And when he finally finds Luffy there, beaten and starving and not having moved, the argument he built to justify the kick collapses. Because Luffy is simply, physically, factually there, exactly where he said he would be. Now this all paves way for Charlotte Pudding. Pudding reveals to Sanji before the wedding that the marriage is a trap, that she will personally execute him at the altar, that the entire Big Mom family plans to assassinate the Vinsmoke family and take their technology. She's brutal about it. She has been performing kindness toward him as a manipulation. She mocks him for having been moved by her kindness. He cries. without defense, for what he believed could have been. The tears are real. He was made, by his mother's sacrifice before his birth, unable to stop feeling. Pudding expected a weapon, someone hardened by the Vinsmoke upbringing, someone who could calculate and respond strategically. She found a person, and the person's inability to be unmoved, his absolute inability to protect himself from the experience of his own feelings, is, for Pudding, eventually the thing that undoes her. When Sanji later calls her third eye beautiful, genuinely, without calculation, she breaks. Her entire protective shell of cruelty has been built on the assumption that people will respond to her difference with mockery or rejection. Sanji responds with wonder. She has never had anyone respond with wonder. She cannot process it. Sanji's humanity is not proven by a clever narrative symmetry. It is proven by what he actually does once he is free to stop performing. When Big Mom's assassination plot turns on the Vinsmoke family at the wedding, Sanji saves them. He saves Judge. He saves the brothers who beat him. He saves the family that imprisoned him, that treated his existence as a defect, that watched his humiliation without intervening. He never says he forgives them. He saves them because he cannot watch people die at a table if there is anything he can do about it. The table is the space Sanji considers sacred, the site of the meal, which is the act of care he has organized his life around. People dying at a table while he has the capacity to prevent it is the specific category of thing he cannot allow. This is not sentimental. It is not even compassion toward the Vinsmoke specifically. It is the principle applied categorically. A hungry person gets fed, regardless of their worth. A person in danger gets saved, regardless of their worth. The principle is not conditional. It never has been. After the rescue, Judge tells Sanji he was wrong. Perhaps emotion is not a weakness after all. That Sanji's act was extraordinary. He frames it as a compliment, a concession, a revised assessment of the Vinsmoke project. Sanji does not accept the compliment. He tells Judge essentially that he is not doing it for Judge's benefit. He is not doing it to prove the Vinsmoke project was valid after all. He is doing it because these are his values, not a rehabilitation of the Germa experiment, his own. Now I'd like to argue this is where the disownment is complete, at this specific moment, when his father tries to claim the outcome of Sanji's humanity as evidence that the Vinsmoke project worked, and Sanji refuses to give him the satisfaction. Judge wanted to engineer humanity out of his children and produce weapons. Sanji was the failure of that project, and now Judge, watching the failure do something extraordinary, wants to claim it as the project's success. The specific cruelty of this is that Judge will never understand why Sanji won't let him have it. That incomprehension is the measure of the distance between them, and this was the best possible resolution to Sanji's arc. After Whole Cake Island, Sanji is left with a raid suit, given to him by the family he has disowned. I have already talked about why he destroyed it earlier in this video. But after destroying it, Sanji fights Queen, himself a heavily modified scientist soldier. Queen is a modified human who has embraced his modification completely. He has turned his body into a weapon, integrated technology into his biology. During the fight, he reveals he can replicate the techniques of all four Vinsmoke brothers, the full range of Germa's genetic enhancement weaponized into combat. He is, in structure, a version of what Sanji could have been, a person who received genetic modification, embraced it, and became a tool in service of a more powerful entity. He represents the path Judge wanted for all of his children. Sanji represents the path Sora gave. Sanji's answer to Queen is Ifrit Jambe. It is produced by the intensity of Sanji's own emotion, a flame so hot it produces blue-white heat, hotter than anything Queen's modified body can withstand. This is Oda's thematic statement in combat form. The thing Judge tried to remove, the emotion, the feeling, the humanness, turns out to be the source of the power. Sanji does not win despite being human. He wins because he is human. His capacity to feel is what produces the specific quality of heat that defeats the modified body built to have no feeling at all. The argument between Sora and Judge, between humanity as gift and humanity as defect, arrives at a verdict here in Wano, expressed in blue fire. The pervy gag undermines the character. I mean, I'd argue Sanji is among the best written characters in this series, but this does undermine him badly at times. At specific moments, in specific arcs, it undermines him badly. For hundreds of chapters, literally hundreds, your typical anime trope, expressed through Sanji alone across 1,000 chapters. It is a running feature of how Oda writes him. And I'm gonna be honest here, it creates tonal whiplash against his most serious moments in ways that are not always earned. There are arcs where the gag feels present because it is expected rather than because it is doing anything. And there is a specific problem that goes beyond the tonal whiplash. The same code that prevents Sanji from hitting women, which I have argued is his sincere moral rejection of the violence he experienced, is sometimes operationalized in ways that are infantilizing to the women around him. The protective intent of the code curdles into paternalism when it is not handled with care. Oda has not fully resolved this tension. That is true. It is not possible to argue that the gag uniformly serves the character. The gag coexists with, and does not negate, the substance. These are not contradictions that cancel each other. They are parts of the same complicated person. And I'm not gonna lie, the people who read Sanji through the gag and conclude that the gag is the character are making the same analytical error that Judge made. The gag is visible. The character is underneath the gag. The gag is not the character. Sanji spent his entire childhood being told that the soft, warm, feeling parts of him were wrong. He emerged from that childhood with a moral code built around those parts. The cooking, the care, the warmth. The hyperbolic enthusiasm for women is part of the same thing, an overcorrection toward a version of emotional expression that his childhood tried to eliminate. The person who is forbidden from expressing feeling with maximum intensity in the directions available to him. It is messier than I would like it to be, but it is not entirely disconnected from the character. There's also another layer to this. The other layer being every single person who hurt Sanji as a child was male. Judge, his brothers, who beat him routinely. That is the entire roster of cruelty in the Germa Kingdom, and every name on it is a man. And the two sources of anything resembling tenderness in that same childhood, the only two, were women. His mother gave her life, so he can feel anything at all. And Reiju, his sister, is the one person inside the walls of Germa who treated him as something other than a defect. She could not stop the beatings. She was not strong enough to fight her brothers directly, but she tended his wounds in secret, snuck him food, protected the kitchen access that let him keep cooking, and eventually risked her own safety to unlock his cell and get him out of the kingdom entirely. She is the only Vinsmoke sibling who never called him a failure. I'm not going to go super in depth here since I have made a dedicated video on the two already, so please go ahead and watch that if you haven't yet. Anyway, Roronoa Zoro and Sanji occupy the same structural position among the Straw Hats, the top end of what the crew can do, the pair that effectively determines whether the ship can survive. They fight constantly. Everybody reads this as rivalry. I think it is more accurate to read it as a philosophical argument about what strength is for. Zoro's power is internal, directional, singular. He is training toward a personal apex, the world's greatest swordsman, and every choice he makes is in service of that trajectory. His training is his relationship with himself. His dream is personal. He does not feed strangers. He does not have a code about people he won't fight. His relationship with the people around him is deep, but expressed through presence rather than care. Sanji's power is outward, protective, expansive. He is not training toward a personal apex. He wants the all blue, a place in the world, not a title in the hierarchy. His training is his relationship with what his body can do in service of other people. He has the code. He feeds everyone. His relationship with the people around him is expressed through the specific act of care. These are complementary philosophies, and the crew requires both. You need the person whose power faces inward, who maintains the structure, who holds the line, who is the spine, and the person whose power faces outward, who feeds the system, who makes the warmth, who is the heart. Sanji without Zoro is a heart without a spine. Zoro without Sanji is a spine without a heart. They fight consistently because they are close enough to irritate each other, because neither can fully respect a philosophy that is the opposite of their own, even when they admire the person holding it. And because underneath the bickering, both of them would die for the other without a second thought, which is the specific dynamic of people whose relationship is too real to be entirely comfortable. When Sanji calls Zoro and asks him to kill him if he loses his humanity, is the clearest proof of this. Of all the people he could call, he calls Zoro, because Zoro is the person he trusts, more than anyone else in the crew, to actually do it. And Zoro agrees immediately. It is the specific kind of respect that passes between people who understand each other at a level that precedes sentiment. What does it cost to stay human? For Sora, it was her life. She took the drug, knowing it would kill her slowly. She did not know which child it would affect. She died over years. The cost was everything. For Zeph, it was his leg. He gave Sanji all the food, kept nothing, survived 85 days by eating his own leg. He came out of it with one leg, and a floating restaurant built on the dream they shared. For Sanji, a whole cake island, his freedom, his crew, almost his life. He left behind every relationship that constituted his identity. He endured his father, his brothers, the wedding trap, the revelation of Pudding's betrayal. He paid every cost available to him. For Sanji and Wano, the power enhancement, the Germa technology, the easier path to winning the fight. He destroyed the raid suit because using it meant risking becoming what he will not become. Every iteration of the question produces the same answer. It costs more than the calculation says it should. The rational move, in every case, is to take the easier path. Keep the suit. Let the Vinsmokes die. Don't take the drug that will kill you. The rational move, every time, is cheaper. And every time, someone pays the higher cost anyway. Because the alternative, the thing on the other side of the calculation, is not simply defeat or loss. The alternative is the abandonment of what makes them the person they are. For Sora, the alternative was Sanji growing up to be what Judge wanted. For Zeph, the alternative was a boy dying on a rock without ever knowing whether the All Blue was real. For Sanji, every time, the alternative is the cage. The humanity was paid for before he could speak. The price was paid by someone else, in full, before he had the capacity to understand what was being purchased. And every time Sanji chooses to keep it, every time he pays the cost of remaining the person Sora made possible, he is honoring a debt that he did not incur and cannot fully repay. He will never fully repay it. That is the nature of the gift. But he can spend his life living in the shape of what she bought. And that is what the character is. There is a specific structure among the Straw Hats. Luffy is the soul, the thing everything organizes around, the specific gravity of the crew. Zoro is the spine, the structure that does not bend, the rigidity that keeps the whole thing upright. Robin is the memory, the keeper of what the world has tried to forget, the one who carries the weight of history so others don't have to. Usopp is the courage, the proof that ordinary is sufficient, that you do not need to be extraordinary to stand in extraordinary circumstances. And Sanji is the heart. He isn't the nicest, nor the most emotional, or even the most gentle. He is the heart, because he is the one who was most specifically and deliberately designed to not have one. Because the entire apparatus of the Vinsmoke project was aimed at removing the thing that makes a heart, but through his mother's sacrifice. And confirmed in that choice by a pirate on a rock, and defended that choice against his father's kingdom and his creator's project and his own body's attempt to become something else, to have one anyway. He first appears in chapter 43, making soup for a marine who doesn't deserve it. The first thing we learn about him is that he makes food and he has a temper and he has a code. Everything we will learn about him for the next 1,000+ chapters is a deeper elaboration of those three things. The moral system stated before it is explained. The character complete in the introduction, waiting for the story to provide its vocabulary. This is the specific genius of Sanji as a character. He is legible from the first chapter in a way that becomes more meaningful, as more context arrives. Every reveal about his past, the cage, the brothers, Sora's sacrifice, the Germa experiment, doesn't change who he is. It explains it. It gives you the backstory of a person you already knew, and the specific weight of what he carries. The debt to Sora, the confirmation from Zeph, the ongoing refusal to become what Judge wanted. The blue-white fire produced by the intensity of his own feeling is the weight of someone who knows, in the most personal and non-abstract way possible, that the capacity to feel is not a weakness to be overcome. It is the most expensive thing in the world. It was purchased by someone who loved him before she knew which of her children he would be. And every time Sanji kicks with the full weight of his emotion, with the fire that only he can produce, in the service of the people he has chosen to love, he is paying that purchase forward. The cost of staying human is the entire character. And it's worth every chapter.